The moldy bread hit the tray with a wet thud. Jessica didn't even try to hide her disgust as she shoved it toward the businessman in 12A. Economy class, economy food. Marcus Williams, 45, adjusted his silk tie and glanced at the green spots spreading across what should have been his lunch. The teenage girl beside him instinctively reached for her phone. Something about this felt deliberate, discriminatory. "Ma'am, this appears to be spoiled," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to being heard. Jessica's eye roll was theatrical. "That's what we serve in economy, sir. You get what you pay for." Her colleague snickered. A woman 2 rows back craned her neck to see what was happening. These are the moments that define us, when dignity meets discrimination, when real-life stories become something larger than their beginning. Marcus's fingers brushed against something metallic in his jacket pocket, his jaw tightening slightly. Have you ever seen someone's career unravel in a single, careless moment? The flight settled into its cruising altitude, but tension in row 12 thickened like storm clouds. Jessica returned with a replacement meal, stale crackers and processed cheese that looked barely edible. "This is the best we have," she announced, her voice carrying across 3 rows. Marcus noticed how she emphasized best, like it was a personal favor. Sarah Chen, 16, in seat 12B, had been documenting everything on her phone since takeoff. Her TikTok account focused on social justice issues, and this situation screamed discrimination. She angled her camera discreetly, capturing Jessica's dismissive gestures. 2 hours, 47 minutes until landing, the captain announced over the intercom. Marcus examined the crackers. He chewed slowly, swallowing not just the stale cracker but the familiar sting of being underestimated. Years of corporate negotiations had taught him when to pick battles. "Thank you," he said simply, his tone neutral. Jessica leaned toward her colleague, Margaret Torres, the senior flight attendant. Her stage whisper carried perfectly. "This is standard economy service. We're doing our best." Margaret, a 20-year veteran with graying hair and tired eyes, approached with practiced authority. "We aim to treat all passengers equally, sir." The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. His fingers lingered on the metallic object in his pocket, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. Sarah's live stream counter hit 89 viewers. A comment caught her attention. "Report this to corporate immediately." The businessman in 8C, David Kim, recognized something familiar in Marcus's composure. He'd seen that particular calm before, in boardrooms during hostile takeovers, when powerful people were gathering information before striking back. Marcus pulled out his leather portfolio, revealing a first-class boarding pass, seat 2A. Sarah's eyes widened. A passenger behind them whispered to his wife, "Why's he sitting back here then?" "Excuse me," Marcus said quietly to Margaret. "I'd like to speak with the flight service director." Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Sir, that really isn't necessary for meal service issues." "I believe it is." Marcus's tone remained conversational, but something had shifted. The temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees. Jessica reappeared with pretzels. "This is what we provide for economy passengers," she said, the emphasis deliberate. An elderly woman in 11A, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been watching the entire exchange. She'd lived through the civil rights era, recognized the coded language. "Young man," she called to Marcus, "you're handling this with remarkable grace." A businessman across the aisle shook his head in disgust. A mother covered her child's ears. The cabin was becoming divided, some passengers filming, others looking uncomfortable. 1 hour, 53 minutes until landing, came another announcement. Margaret returned with Tom Bradley, the flight service director, a tall man in his 50s with the harried look of someone perpetually putting out fires. "I understand there's been some confusion about meal service," Tom said, his practiced smile suggesting routine damage control. "No confusion," Marcus replied calmly. "Just documentation." He gestured to his portfolio where an American Express Centurion card was partially visible. the kind that required astronomical spending power. Documentation? Tom's smile faltered slightly. I'm thorough about these things, Marcus said, his voice carrying quiet authority. Sarah's live stream had reached 156 viewers. Comments were flooding in, passengers on the plane finding her stream and watching their own situation unfold in real time. Sir, Tom continued, I'm sure we can resolve this quickly. Sometimes our crew can be direct in their service approach. Direct, Marcus repeated slowly, as if testing the words. Interesting choice of terminology. Jessica, emboldened by Tom's diplomatic tone, jumped back in. Look, this is standard airline service. If there are issues with our protocols, you can file a complaint after landing. The cabin fell silent. Even the hum of the engines seemed to quiet. David Kim whispered to his wife, That woman has no idea what she just walked into. Marcus closed his portfolio with deliberate precision. His phone buzzed, not a standard device, but something that screamed executive privilege. Sarah caught a glimpse of the screen. Multiple notifications marked, Urgent, Board Meeting. 1 hour, 23 minutes until landing, the captain announced, oblivious to the corporate time bomb ticking in the main cabin. Tom, Marcus said quietly, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation about service standards. Something in his tone made Tom's practiced smile freeze. The way Marcus said it carried weight that went beyond customer complaints. Sir, Of course. What specific concerns do you have? Marcus glanced around the cabin, noting the multiple phones recording, passengers leaning forward. A teenager 2 rows up had his camera out. An older gentleman was typing furiously on his laptop. The entire situation was being documented from multiple angles. I have concerns about systematic discrimination, Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying across the cabin. I have concerns about hostile service environments, and I have serious concerns about breach of contract. Breach of contract? Tom's voice cracked slightly, his fingers twitching at his side. We'll discuss it after landing, Marcus said, his voice carrying quiet finality. I have some calls to make. He pulled out his phone again. This time, Sarah's camera caught more detail, a corporate badge clipped to a lanyard partially hidden in his jacket. The letters UA were barely visible. Mrs. Rodriguez leaned forward. Sir, whatever you're planning, you have my full support. The pieces were falling into place, but the full picture remained tantalizingly out of reach. Marcus's calm demeanor suggested this wasn't his first time handling discrimination, but something about his confidence hinted that this time would be different. This time, he had the power to do something about it. The next 40 minutes transformed Row 12 into ground zero of a corporate disaster in the making. Jessica's confidence had grown dangerous. Instead of direct confrontation, she employed surgical precision, deliberately skipping Marcus during beverage service while loudly announcing to nearby passengers, I'll assume you don't need anything else, sir. Her smile was razor-sharp. Margaret positioned herself strategically in the aisle, clipboard in hand, creating visual authority. When Marcus quietly requested water, she responded with theatrical concern. Sir, constant requests might make other passengers uncomfortable during our service time. 47 minutes until landing, the captain announced. Sarah's live stream had grown to 287 viewers. Comments streamed past faster than she could read. This is textbook discrimination. Someone screen record this. What airline? I'm never flying them. That guy is way too calm. He knows something. Marcus continued making methodical notes in his leather journal. Each observation was precise, time-stamped, clinical. When Jessica deliberately dropped a napkin near his feet and retrieved it with an exaggerated sigh, he simply looked up and smiled politely. That smile made her pause. Something about its confidence felt wrong. David Kim leaned toward his wife. Corporate executives don't take notes like that unless they're building a case. Tom Bradley approached Marcus's row again, his diplomatic facade showing stress fractures. His fingers fumbled with his tie, eyes darting toward Margaret for reassurance. "Sir, I hope you understand we're just following standard protocols." "Standard protocols?" Marcus repeated, writing in his journal. "For meal complaints?" "Well, when passengers become vocal about service issues." "Vocal." Marcus's pen moved across the page. "I've said perhaps 15 words total." Mrs. Rodriguez's voice carried decades of righteous indignation. "This gentleman has been nothing but polite while your crew—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "While your crew has been less than professional." The cabin was choosing sides. A businessman across the aisle shook his head in disgust. A young mother whispered to her companion, "This is going viral." A curious child asked loudly, "Mommy, why is she being so mean?" 23 minutes until landing. Jessica's next move revealed her fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. She deliberately positioned herself in Marcus's line of sight while serving first-class meals that had somehow remained from an earlier service. "Some passengers understand that premium service requires premium tickets," she announced, making sure Marcus could see the quality difference. Marcus looked around the cabin. He pulled out his leather portfolio and casually revealed his boarding pass, seat 2A, first class. Sarah's camera caught it. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized the implications. "I seem to have the right ticket," Marcus said quietly. "I just prefer to observe service standards from different perspectives." Tom's face drained of color. Margaret clutched her radio a little too tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line as if suppressing panic. Marcus's phone vibrated with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, and for the first time, his expression shifted slightly. Not anger, but something like anticipation. "Excuse me," he said, answering. "Marcus Williams." Several passengers looked up at the formal way he stated his name. Sarah zoomed in on his face as he listened. His responses were minimal but telling. "Yes, I'm currently experiencing the situation firsthand." "No, I think documentation is sufficient for now." "Prepare the quarterly partnership review materials, all compliance sections." He hung up and immediately dialed another number. Tom's fingers trembled as he adjusted his tie again. Those words, quarterly partnership review and compliance sections, didn't sound like customer service language. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Tom suggested, his voice tight with growing panic. "No need," Marcus replied, still dialing. "Transparency is important in partnerships." The second call connected. "Linda, it's Marcus. I need the Section 15 compliance reports ready for immediate review." A pause. Every discrimination clause. "Tonight." Margaret's radio crackled with urgent whispered communications from the cockpit. 15 minutes until landing. David Kim was putting pieces together. Partnership reviews, compliance reports, discrimination clauses. That's not passenger language. That's board-level authority. Jessica, still operating in her bubble of perceived power, made her final catastrophic decision. "Sir, you need to comply with crew instructions or face consequences upon landing." Marcus let her words settle, a familiar weight he'd carried too many times before. He stopped writing and looked directly at her, his expression shifting from polite tolerance to something approaching pity. "Jessica," he said quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the cabin, "I want you to remember this exact moment." Something in his tone made the entire section fall silent. "Remember exactly what you just threatened, because in 14 minutes, you're going to understand the difference between authority and accountability." He pulled out his phone again. This time, Sarah's angle caught part of the screen, a contact showing United Airlines with what appeared to be an executive extension. The call connected immediately. "This is Marcus Williams. I need an emergency compliance review team at LAX immediately. Full documentation of discriminatory practices required." Tom looked like he might collapse. Margaret's hands shook as she gripped her radio, finally understanding they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. 10 minutes until landing. Flight attendants, prepare for arrival. But the crew wasn't preparing for a normal arrival anymore. They were preparing for what was beginning to look like a career-ending catastrophe. Marcus closed his journal with deliberate finality. As he secured it in his portfolio, his jacket shifted slightly, revealing the edge of a corporate access badge. Sarah caught a glimpse of the United Airlines logo and what looked like "board of" before the angle shifted. Her live stream chat exploded as viewers tried to process what they'd just seen. 5 minutes until landing. Jessica stood frozen in the aisle, finally beginning to understand that something had gone terribly wrong. The confident smirks had vanished. The calculated cruelty had been replaced by dawning horror. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto hers with a calm that felt like a storm gathering. 5 minutes until you learn that some passengers hold more than tickets. The engines changed pitch as they approached LAX, but for Jessica, Margaret, and Tom, the real descent was just beginning. Outside, the California sun was setting. Inside, careers were about to do the same. The Boeing 737 touched down at LAX with the gentleness of a feather, but the impact inside the cabin was seismic. As the aircraft taxied toward the gate, Marcus Williams remained seated while chaos erupted around him in slow motion. Jessica stood frozen in the aisle, her face a mask of dawning comprehension. The confidence that had sustained her for the past 3 hours was crumbling like sand. Margaret clutched her radio with white knuckles, receiving increasingly frantic messages from ground control. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles International Airport," the captain announced, oblivious to the corporate earthquake about to shake his airline. Sarah's live stream had reached 847 viewers. The comments section was a digital stampede. "This is about to be legendary. Someone's getting fired. I can't believe this is happening live. That badge said Board of Directors." Marcus finally stood, his movements deliberate and unhurried. At 6 feet tall, he commanded the space around him effortlessly. He straightened his silk tie, a gesture that somehow felt like armor being donned. "Mr. Williams," Tom Bradley's voice cracked as he approached, "perhaps we could discuss this situation privately." Marcus smiled, the same polite smile he'd worn throughout the flight, but now it carried different weight. "Tom, I believe transparency serves everyone's interests better." He pulled out his phone and speed-dialed a number. The call connected before the first ring. "Linda, it's Marcus. I'm on the ground. How quickly can you assemble the executive team?" Sarah's camera captured his side of the conversation. "Yes, I have documentation. Extensive documentation. Multiple witnesses, including live video testimony. Discrimination, hostile service environment, and breach of our partnership equality standards." He hung up and immediately placed another call. "Security? This is Marcus Williams. I need a conference room at the United Club immediately. Priority clearance." The color drained from Tom's face. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Jessica finally found her voice. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Marcus turned to her with infinite patience. "Jessica, what exactly do you think you misunderstood?" "I mean, I was just doing my job, following procedures." "Procedures." Marcus opened his leather portfolio and pulled out a document. "Let me share some procedures with you." He handed her a printed page. Sarah zoomed in as Jessica's eyes scanned the text, her face transitioning from confusion to horror. "This is the United Airlines Partner Code of Conduct," Marcus explained calmly. "Section 15, subsection 3. Can you read the highlighted portion aloud?" Jessica's voice was barely audible. "All partner representatives and their families must be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of seating class or—" She stopped reading. Her hands were shaking. "Continue," Marcus encouraged gently. "Regardless of seating class or apparent demographic characteristics. Any discriminatory behavior toward partner representatives constitutes immediate grounds for termination and potential legal action." The cabin had gone silent except for the hum of auxiliary power. Even the children had stopped talking. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out his corporate badge, holding it where everyone could see. Sarah's camera focused on it clearly for the first time. United Airlines Board of Directors, Marcus Williams, Chief Partnership Officer. The live stream chat exploded. "Oh my God! He's on the board! They're so fired! This is insane!" Mrs. Rodriguez gasped audibly. David Kim whispered to his wife, "Holy shit, he's not just a passenger, he's their boss." Marcus continued with devastating calm. "Jessica, do you understand what a partnership officer does?" She shook her head, unable to speak. "I manage United's relationships with our corporate clients, companies that spend hundreds of millions of dollars annually on our services." He paused, letting that sink in. "I also evaluate whether our staff upholds the values we promise those clients." Tom Bradley looked like he might faint. "Mr. Williams, I had no idea. That's exactly the problem, Tom." Marcus's voice remained conversational. "You should treat every passenger as if they might be evaluating your service, because they are." He pulled out his phone again, this time showing the screen to the assembled crew. "I've been recording this entire flight through our new service quality monitoring system. Every interaction, every comment, every discriminatory act has been documented." Sarah's viewer count hit 200. News outlets were starting to reach out to her directly. Marcus looked at Jessica with something approaching sympathy. "Jessica, in your mind, what gave you the authority to treat me the way you did?" I don't know. You were sitting in economy, and I thought..." "You thought what?" "I thought you were just..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Just what, Jessica?" "Just a regular passenger," she whispered. "A regular passenger?" Marcus nodded slowly. "And regular passengers deserve to be served moldy food? To be mocked for their appearance? To be threatened with removal for taking notes?" The questions hung in the air like accusations. Margaret finally found her voice. "Mr. Williams, I sincerely apologize. If we had known..." "If you had known what, Margaret? That I was on the board? That I have authority?" Marcus's tone remained gentle, but his words cut deep. "Should your service quality depend on who you think someone is?" He gestured toward the passengers. "Mrs. Rodriguez in 11A is a retired teacher who spent 40 years shaping young minds. David Kim in 8C runs a nonprofit that feeds homeless families. Sarah here is a 16-year-old activist who's been documenting injustice with more integrity than some news organizations." Each passenger he mentioned straightened with pride. "Every person on this aircraft deserves dignity, not because of their job title or their bank account, but because they're human." Tom was sweating profusely. "Mr. Williams, how can we fix this?" Marcus smiled that same patient smile. "Tom, that's exactly the right question. But it's not just about fixing this incident. It's about fixing the system that allowed it to happen." He pulled out his leather journal and flipped to a page covered in timestamps and notes. "According to my documentation, discriminatory behavior began at 11:47 a.m. with the deliberately spoiled meal. It escalated at 12:23 p.m. with comments about expectations. By 1:45 p.m., we had threats of removal for note-taking. Each timestamp was a nail in their professional coffins. The question isn't whether this was discrimination. The question is what we do about it." His phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at it and smiled. "That would be our CEO. She's been following the situation remotely." He looked directly at Jessica. "She's not pleased." The aircraft had reached the gate. The passenger boarding bridge was connecting with mechanical precision, but nobody moved toward the exits. Marcus stood and addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience during this unfortunate situation. Your support for basic human dignity has been noted and will be recognized." He turned back to the crew. "Jessica, Margaret, Tom, you have a choice. You can learn from this experience and become better professionals, or you can continue to believe that some passengers matter more than others." The boarding door opened. A woman in a crisp business suit appeared. Linda Chen, United's VP of Human Resources, flanked by two security officers. "Mr. Williams," she said formally, "the executive team is assembled." Marcus nodded and gathered his belongings. As he walked toward the exit, he paused next to Jessica one final time. "Jessica, I hope you understand that this isn't about punishment, it's about accountability. There's a difference." He reached the boarding door and turned back to address the cabin one last time. "For those filming and sharing this story, I want you to know that change is possible. But it requires all of us to demand better, to expect dignity, to refuse to accept that's just how things are." Sarah's live stream reached 1,500 viewers as Marcus Williams, board member and chief partnership officer of United Airlines, walked off the aircraft he'd been discriminated against on. Behind him, 3 careers hung in the balance. Outside, the California sun was setting over LAX, painting the sky in shades of justice. The United Airlines executive conference room at LAX buzzed with tension thicker than the Los Angeles smog. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the runway, but nobody was admiring the scenery. Marcus Williams sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, his leather portfolio open before him. Across from him, Jessica Martinez, Margaret Torres, and Tom Bradley occupied chairs that felt increasingly like defendants' benches. Linda Chen, VP of Human Resources, had assembled what could only be described as a corporate tribunal. Present were David Morrison, Chief Operations Officer, Sarah Kim, VP of Customer Experience, and via video conference, CEO Rebecca Martinez, whose expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. "Let's begin," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to boardroom command. "Today's incident represents a systemic failure of our customer service standards and, more critically, our partnership obligations." He opened his tablet and projected data onto the conference room screen. United Airlines currently maintains partnerships with 847 major corporations, generating $2.3 billion in annual revenue. These partnerships are built on trust, quality service, and our explicit commitment to treating all passengers with dignity. Jessica stared at the numbers, finally comprehending the magnitude of what had transpired. "The incident began at 11:47 a.m., Marcus continued, his tone clinical. "I was deliberately served spoiled food while seated in economy class, a seating choice I made to conduct routine service quality assessment." Tom Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Williams, we had no way of knowing." "Tom, that's precisely the point. Quality service shouldn't depend on passenger identification. It should be universal." CEO Martinez leaned forward on the video screen. "Marcus, walk us through the specific violations." Marcus pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Jessica's voice filled the room. "That's what you get in economy class." The room went silent. "Violation 1, deliberate service discrimination based on seating class and perceived socioeconomic status." He played another clip. "Maybe try the bus next time." Violation 2, hostile communication designed to humiliate a passenger. A third recording. "You need to comply with crew instructions or face removal upon landing." Violation 3, threats of unlawful removal for lawful passenger activities. Jessica's face had gone ashen. Each recorded statement was a career-ending missile. David Morrison, the COO, looked grim. "Marcus, what are the immediate financial implications?" "I'm glad you asked, David." Marcus pulled up another document. "Our largest partnership agreement is with Morrison Industries, $127 million annually. Their CEO, James Morrison, is your nephew, correct?" David nodded slowly. "He's been following this situation via social media. His initial response was, and I quote, 'If United treats passengers like this, what does that say about their corporate values?'" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. 3 other major partners have already reached out expressing concern. Delta Star Holdings, Pinnacle Corp, and Alliance Systems are all requesting immediate clarification about our service standards. Marcus pulled out a printed document. This is our Partnership Service Agreement, Section 12, Subsection 7. It states that any discriminatory behavior by United personnel constitutes material breach of contract, allowing partners to terminate agreements with 30 days' notice. He looked directly at Jessica. Jessica, do you understand that your actions today put $847 million in annual revenue at risk? Jessica's voice was barely audible. I didn't know. You didn't know that treating passengers with dignity was part of your job? Sarah Kim, VP of Customer Experience, cleared her throat. What's our social media situation? Marcus smiled grimly. The incident was live-streamed to over 1,500 viewers. The video has been shared 847 times in the past hour. # United Discrimination is trending on 3 platforms. He pulled up social media analytics on the screen. Current sentiment analysis shows 94% negative response. Our brand trust rating has dropped 12 points in the last 2 hours. CEO Martinez looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 minutes. What are our legal exposures? Civil rights violations, breach of contract, potential class action discrimination lawsuit, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. Our legal team estimates potential damages between $15 to $50 million, not including partnership losses. Tom Bradley finally spoke. Mr. Williams, what would you recommend? Marcus leaned back, considering. Tom, that's the first intelligent question you've asked all day. He stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. We have 3 options. Option 1. Treat this as an isolated incident. Provide minimal discipline and hope it disappears. Probability of success, virtually 0. He turned back to the table. Option 2. Implement comprehensive policy changes, mandatory bias training, and create transparent accountability measures. Probability of success, moderate but expensive. And option 3? CEO Martinez asked. Option 3. We use this as a catalyst for industry-leading change. We become the airline that doesn't just respond to discrimination. We prevent it. Marcus pulled out his final document. I've prepared a comprehensive reform proposal. It includes real-time service monitoring, enhanced diversity training, customer dignity protocols, and a new position, Chief Equality Officer. He placed the document on the table. The program costs $8.7 million to implement system-wide. That's roughly 0.4% of our annual revenue. David Morrison leaned forward. What about the immediate situation? Marcus looked at each crew member in turn. Jessica, you made a choice to treat a passenger as less than human because of how he looked and where he sat. In any other industry, that would be career-ending. Jessica started to cry silently. However, Marcus continued, I believe in redemption through education. You can choose to become part of the solution. He turned to Margaret. Margaret, you have 20 years of experience. You should have stopped this discrimination, not enabled it. Margaret nodded, tears in her eyes. I know, I failed. Yes, you did. But failure can be a teacher if you let it. Finally, he addressed Tom. Tom, as a supervisor, you're responsible for the culture your team creates. That culture nearly cost us hundreds of millions in partnerships. Tom looked broken. How do we fix this? Marcus returned to his seat. Immediate actions. Jessica and Margaret are suspended pending completion of intensive bias training and community service with civil rights organizations. Tom, you're demoted to senior flight attendant for 6 months while undergoing leadership rehabilitation. He looked at CEO Martinez on the screen. Long-term actions. We implement the comprehensive reform program, establish the Office of Equality, and create transparent reporting mechanisms for discrimination incidents. CEO Martinez nodded slowly. What about the passengers who witnessed this? They're going to receive personal apologies, flight vouchers, and invitations to serve on our new Customer Dignity Advisory Board. Marcus pulled up one final slide. Ladies and gentlemen, Today's incident cost us approximately $2.3 million in immediate damages, put $847 million in partnerships at risk, and damaged our brand reputation significantly. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. But it also gave us an opportunity. We can either be the airline that got caught discriminating, or we can be the airline that chose to lead the industry in equality. Jessica looked up through her tears. Mr. Williams, why are you giving us a second chance? Marcus's expression softened slightly. Because I believe people can change. Because I've experienced discrimination my entire career and learned that responding with compassion is more powerful than responding with anger. He gathered his documents. The question isn't whether you deserve a second chance. The question is what you'll do with it. CEO Martinez's voice filled the room. Marcus, I want you to personally oversee the implementation of these reforms, whatever resources you need. Understood. I'll have a detailed timeline by tomorrow morning. As the meeting concluded, Marcus turned to the three crew members one final time. Jessica, Margaret, Tom, you have an opportunity to become advocates for change instead of casualties of it. Don't waste it. He walked toward the door, then paused. And remember, every passenger is someone's family member. Treat them like you'd want your own family treated. The conference room fell silent as Marcus Williams left, having transformed a moment of discrimination into a catalyst for systemic change. Outside, the sun was setting over LAX, but inside United Airlines, a new dawn was beginning. 3 months after the incident that would become known internally as Flight 447, United Airlines had transformed from a company scrambling to contain damage into an industry leader in equality initiatives. Marcus Williams stood before the United Airlines Board of Directors, presenting the quarterly diversity report. The conference room, once filled with crisis management tension, now buzzed with genuine pride. The Marcus Williams protocol has exceeded all projections, he announced, pulling up comprehensive data on the main screen. Customer satisfaction scores have increased 23% across all demographics. Employee bias incident reports have dropped 67%. Most importantly, our partnership renewals are at 98%, the highest in company history. Jessica Martinez sat in the back row, wearing the uniform of a United Airlines diversity ambassador. Her transformation had been remarkable. After completing 200 hours of community service with the NAACP and intensive bias training, she'd requested a transfer to the newly created Office of Equality. The passenger feedback system launched in August has processed over 12,000 service evaluations, Marcus continued. Real-time alerts allow us to address issues immediately rather than after they escalate. CEO Rebecca Martinez nodded approvingly. What's our financial impact? Revenue positive, Marcus replied with satisfaction. The $8.7 million investment in equality programs has generated $47 million in new partnerships. Companies want to work with organizations that demonstrate genuine commitment to inclusion. Margaret Torres, now a senior trainer in the Customer Dignity Program, raised her hand. Marcus, what feedback are we getting from other airlines? Excellent question, Margaret. American Airlines has requested consulting on implementing similar programs. Delta and Southwest are developing their own versions. We've essentially raised the industry standard. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that Margaret, once part of the discrimination problem, had become one of the solution's most effective advocates. Tom Bradley, having successfully completed his leadership rehabilitation, spoke from his position as lead equality monitor. The crew reporting system has been particularly effective. Flight attendants are now comfortable reporting bias incidents before they escalate. Marcus pulled up a testimonial video. Mrs. Rodriguez, the passenger who'd witnessed the original incident, appeared on screen. United Airlines didn't just apologize, they changed, she said, her voice carrying conviction. I've flown with them 6 times since Flight 447, and the difference is remarkable. Every employee seems committed to treating passengers with dignity. The board members smiled. Genuine customer advocacy was worth more than any marketing campaign. The Community Advisory Board has been instrumental, Marcus explained. 12 passengers from Flight 447 now serve as quarterly consultants, reviewing policies and training materials. Sarah Chen, the teenager who live-streamed the incident, has become our youngest advisory board member. He pulled up social media analytics. Our brand sentiment has not only recovered but exceeded pre-incident levels. #United Changes has generated over 100,000 positive mentions. The story of redemption resonates more powerfully than the original discrimination. David Morrison, the COO, leaned forward. What about employee satisfaction? Up 34% company-wide, Marcus replied. When employees feel supported by clear policies and proper training, they perform better. Our turnover rate has dropped to industry-leading levels. The presentation concluded with a video montage of employee testimonials, customer praise, and news coverage of United's transformation. What had begun as a crisis management nightmare had evolved into a genuine competitive advantage. After the board meeting, Marcus walked through LAX Terminal 7 observing the changes firsthand. Digital displays promoted the customer dignity promise. Diversity posters featured real employees sharing their stories. The equality hotline number was prominently displayed at every gate. He paused at Gate 47, where Flight 447 had originated 3 months earlier. A plaque now hung beside the boarding area, in recognition of all passengers who demand dignity and all employees who provide it. Jessica approached, carrying a tablet with the day's passenger feedback scores. Marcus, I wanted to thank you again for giving me a second chance. Jessica, you earned that chance by choosing to grow from your mistakes. I've been thinking about that day constantly, she continued. I realized I wasn't just discriminating against you. I was discriminating against the person I could have been. Marcus smiled. That's the most profound insight I've heard about this entire situation. A United Airlines flight was boarding nearby. Marcus watched as crew members greeted each passenger with genuine warmth, regardless of their seating class or appearance. The culture had fundamentally shifted. His phone buzzed with a message from CEO Martinez. Industry Week wants to feature United's transformation on their cover. From crisis to culture change, how one incident revolutionized an airline. Marcus replied, Perfect. Make sure Jessica and Margaret are interviewed. Their stories of personal growth are as important as the corporate changes. As he walked toward his car, Marcus reflected on the journey. 3 months ago, he'd been served moldy food by a discriminatory flight attendant. Today, United Airlines was being recognized as the most inclusive airline in America. The difference between those two moments wasn't just policy changes or training programs. It was the recognition that every interaction matters. Every passenger deserves dignity, and every employee has the power to choose compassion over prejudice. Real change, Marcus had learned, doesn't happen through punishment. It happens through education, opportunity, and the courage to transform pain into purpose. 6 months after Flight 447, the story had transcended airline industry boundaries to become a masterclass in corporate accountability and human dignity. Marcus Williams stood in the United Airlines training facility, watching new employees participate in the Customer Dignity Simulation, a program where staff experienced service from the passenger perspective across different demographic presentations. The exercise had become mandatory for all customer-facing positions. The most powerful lesson, Marcus addressed the trainees, is that you never know who's sitting in seat 12A. But more importantly, it shouldn't matter. Sarah Chen, now 17 and a freshman at UCLA studying social justice, had parlayed her viral live stream into a platform for change. Her TikTok account, @RealLifeJustice, had grown to 2.3 million followers who looked to her for authentic stories of discrimination and redemption. What happened on Flight 447 wasn't unique, she often told her audience. What made it special was that someone with power chose to use it for good instead of revenge. The incident had spawned a documentary, 30,000 Feet Above Bias, which won the Sundance Film Festival's Social Impact Award. Jessica Martinez, now Director of Employee Transformation, co-produced the film and shared her journey from perpetrator to advocate. "I thought I was just serving food," she reflected in the documentary's closing scene. "I didn't realize I was serving judgment." The ripple effects extended far beyond aviation. The Marcus Williams Protocol had been adapted by hotel chains, retail corporations, and government agencies. Harvard Business School now taught a case study on transforming crisis into cultural change. But perhaps the most profound impact was personal. Marcus had received over 50,000 letters from people sharing their own experiences with discrimination, many crediting his response with inspiring them to speak up rather than stay silent. Mrs. Rodriguez, now 73, had become an unlikely social media influencer, sharing stories of civil rights progress with her 100,000 Instagram followers. "Change isn't a destination," she frequently posted. "It's a daily choice." The story had become part of something larger, a movement of touching stories that proved real-life stories could create lasting change. These weren't just Black stories or any single community's struggles. They were human stories about dignity, redemption, and the courage to demand better. As Marcus walked through LAX for his regular flight, now always in first class by choice rather than necessity, he noticed the subtle but significant changes. Crew members made eye contact with every passenger. Service standards were consistently high regardless of seating section. The culture of dignity had become embedded in daily operations. His phone buzzed with a message from David Kim, the businessman who'd witnessed the original incident. "Flying United today." Crew member mentioned she was trained by Jessica Martinez. "The world really can change." Marcus smiled, remembering his own words from that day 6 months ago. Every passenger is someone's family member. The real victory wasn't that he'd had the power to create change. It was that he'd chosen to use that power to lift others up rather than tear them down. Your turn to be part of the change. Have you witnessed discrimination in your daily life? Share your story in the comments below. Every voice matters in creating a more dignified world. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in the power of accountability and second chances. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that how we treat others reflects who we are. Join the conversation. How do you think companies should handle discrimination? What would you have done in Marcus's position? Together, we can transform moments of injustice into catalysts for lasting change.